I always felt like, oh, it wasn't good enough. It never was good enough. And that was that constant comparison. Honestly, like, shoot, I pitch in a bullpen with probably a few Hall of Famers, like Craig Kimbrell. He's going to be first ballot. And like, I found myself comparing myself to him.
Welcome, everybody, to our exclusive interview series. I'm so excited today to invite a friend of mine on the show. I've been wanting to get him back. We did an interview probably a couple years ago at this point, and I just know from a coach perspective, from a student-athlete perspective, you need to hear from him, his story, his background, the journey that he's been on. And so we'll get into that here in a little bit, but today, I get to introduce you to Daniel Winkler. Now, to give you a little background on Daniel, he is originally from Effingham, Illinois. He played college baseball at University of Central Florida. He was originally drafted by the Colorado Rockies, although he ended up playing professionally for the Cubs and Braves and a number of other minor league teams as well. And I've had the pleasure to get to know him over the years, to spend a lot of time with him. And as you're going to hear, right, when we talk about the mindset from going high school to college to the professional levels, about navigating that world and overcoming adversity, Daniel is an absolute expert, guru, just a athletic titan, as we call all of our guests here. So without further ado, Daniel Winkler, welcome to the interview. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me. I got to give a shout out to you because my career wouldn't have been near as good as it was without you. So got to give a big thanks to you for that.
No, I very much appreciate that. And, because of the time we got to spend together, I mean, I've seen you pitch live. I've watched so many games of yours just over the years, right? And it's just awesome to be able to come on today and just share with the listeners just kind of how you've got to that level, how you stayed at that level, and how you work through some pretty big things over your career. And I think it's important for these individuals to understand.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And, the first question I want to start is, what's, one of your greatest memories from your playing days? And that's a loaded question. That's a big question, but what's one of the greatest memories you have of playing baseball?
Yeah. Oh man. I have so many. I was just blessed to play as long as I did. There are tons of them. I always say I had 3 debuts, essentially. I debuted in 2015 after coming back from Tommy John, and it was in Citi Field. 2015, the year the Mets that went to the World Series, so it was a packed house. Make your debut in New York City. Like, that's what I envisioned big league baseball as, like a big city, bright lights kind of thing. And then 2016, I made the opening day roster, and I got to pitch the last opening day in Turner Field, struck out the side. And then after I broke my elbow, I'm sure we'll probably get into all of it. I came back and in 2017, and that was almost like another debut for me. Baseball memory, like pitching, those got to be up there. But like total baseball memory, it's just like getting to share it with my family. That's, you probably hear this from a lot of athletes, but getting to bring my son into the clubhouse and eating breakfast with him at Wrigley Field, like some things dads don't get to do very often. And I got to share that with my son. So those are my most cherished memories. But yeah, so like I said, the 3 debuts would be like baseball memories.
I love that. Well, I think it's important too, sometimes the things outside of the game itself, right? As a pitcher, again, you're under the lights, you're on the mound by yourself, especially in that you were put in some, pretty precarious positions, meaning when you come in as a relief pitcher and as a closer at certain points in your career, there's a lot of pressure associated with that, right? And so you get somebody out, strike him out. It's amazing and it's great and it's a great memory. But I love the fact of just beyond the field, right? It's like just the camaraderie, the bringing your son to the, and your wife to the park, and now you've grown the family to multiple kids now.
Yeah.
Those are special things, right? To appreciate it beyond just, I'm throwing a ball, trying to win a game.
Yeah. I distinctly remember 2018, my best year. My son he wasn't one yet, but I had just gotten a big hold. We were playing the Mets in a race and a pennant race, and got home. And my wife was like, "All right, your turn to change the diapers." It's just like this. I'm changing my son's diapers and hanging out with him, putting the bed, and when an hour ago I was getting the best in the world out. So like that contrast, it's cool. It really is. It really is to see both lenses.
Absolutely. Well, as you look back at your career, right, that transition from high school to the collegiate level to then obviously the professional level, what were some of the biggest differences going from kind of high school to collegiate level and then collegiate level to the professional level? What were some things like that transition? What did that look like?
Yeah. I always say that for me, I was from a small town. I went to a small high school, and I went to junior college out of high school. So like for me, it was kind of always that like stepping stone. Like I never was the best on even my high school team. I probably wasn't the best player on that team, but there was always that like drive and desire to be better. And I think me not being the best, I went to junior college and I played with three other big leaguers. Kevin Kiermaier is still playing. He was Gold Glover, perennial Gold Glover, All-Star a couple of years. I wasn't the best player on that team. And then I go to UCF and we had, we made a regional that year. We had probably 7 guys made it to the big leagues, and it was always that. And then I was a 20th rounder, so I always had that chip on my shoulder that, hey, I got something to prove. And it was just never resting on where I was. I see and hear people like, oh, treat this as your major leagues. And I never, I always had that goal. And that's what drove me, was to reach that goal, and just be better and keep getting better. And so like those late nights when I'm reading a book at 11 p.m. and my buddies are out, partying, I'm reading a mental skills book, or like Mariano Rivera book in college. Like those things always drove me. I always had that like passion to be better. So I don't know. Like I said, the stepping stone was really, really big for me. Yes. And just like, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm going to get to the next level, just get to that next level and get to that next one. So yeah, I would say that was huge for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And when did you ever struggle with that comparison to like other players or other pitchers? And how did you deal with that side of it? And maybe you didn't, but if you did, how did you deal with that? Because I think it's a natural thing that a lot of athletes go through, is constant comparison. Like maybe they're bigger, stronger, faster. Maybe they're not. Yeah. Kind of always weighing yourself against the other person.
Yeah. I will say when I pitched my worst, I was comparison all day. And it wasn't even, I shouldn't even say pitch bad, because maybe results were fine, but it was always this like feeling for me. I always felt like, oh, it wasn't good enough. It never was good enough. And that was that constant comparison. Honestly, like, shoot, I pitch in a bullpen with probably a few Hall of Famers, like Craig Kimbrell. He's going to be first ballot. And like, I found myself comparing myself to him and being like, oh, like, I don't know, that constant, it never made me happy. And then, I can look back on my career in the days and the weeks and the months and the seasons that I wasn't comparing, where I was just, it was all about the process. It was all about, hey, take this pitch one at a time. The results will happen. I'm not worried about the results. I'm in the moment. I'm where my feet are. Those are when, throughout the long haul, I pitch the best. Results in the moment may not have been what I wanted, but there was always that I'm going to figure it out. When on the opposite would be true, I would pitch well and I'd strike out the side or something. It was never good enough. And then in the long haul, that's when I fell apart. And so, yes. I had that comparison. It's always something where I always battled, and I think everyone does. The greatest, I think, are established in their process, and they don't worry about whatever other people are doing. I actually heard a great story about Joey Votto on a podcast recently. It was May, and a reporter asked him, he's hitting 204, and they're like, well, how are you doing? And what are you going to do with this? And I think he said, if I finish below 200 at the end of the year, I will give my money back and retire. And he finished the second in MVP that year. And it was just all about process for him, and all about like, hey, I know who I am. I know what I can do. So like staying in that that's when I pitch my best, for sure.
Yes. I love that, because we all get caught up in that comparison, or we kind of can lose sight of that process, and being able to refocus back to that, I think, is a critical piece, right?
Yeah.
You shared a story, and you shared a story with my son a long time ago at this point. I feel like it's a long time ago. It's probably like 4 to 5 years ago at this point. And I love talking about the story, because you talk about that chip on your shoulder, right? And it started at a young age for you, with kind of that all-star team that you were on, you'll tell the story here in a minute, but to set it up and give context for everybody watching, I had called Daniel at one point, and my son had not made the team he wanted in hockey. So obviously a very different sport, and I asked Daniel if he would talk to him, and he kindly obliged and said, absolutely. And he said, I've got a story to share with him. And so I let him get on the phone, and they shared a story in private, and then you shared that with me later. Your love for going to the major league started early. So can you tell that story a little bit about that all-star team and what, I don't know, just that trigger, the words you were saying?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're talking about like I never was on, all-star teams growing up. I think the first all-star team I made when I was 15 years old. And I didn't, I think I made it. I'm not sure why I made it. Honestly, I didn't play. Let's say that. And then even when I was 16, I played some in my freshman high school, enough to letter. I don't know how that even works, but I lettered my freshman year, but I didn't make the all-star team that summer. And so then when I was 16, that's kind of when I grew up. But like, again, going back to that process, I never was the best. But like, I always had a chip on my shoulder to prove that I was like better. And, I think that goes back. This is going to go a side story, but when I was drafted in the 20th round, I thought I was going to be a fifth rounder, a fourth, fifth, sixth rounder. And I wasn't. I remember that day, like I kept slipping down the board and watching the draft tracker, and it happened when it happened. And I remember like, I'm going to make the big leagues. I'm going to make it. Like, I remember like that day, like I'm going to prove everyone wrong. And I remember, and I pitched well that summer. And then I remember going to instructional league, and that's where they kind of send all the draft, like the prospects. And so I was lucky enough to go to that. And I remember all these guys talking about what they're going to do with their bonus. Like, I'm going to buy this Camaro or this Mustang or whatever. And that made me like even that chip even bigger. And so like, again, going back to like, I had this drive and this passion to always be better than because of where I was, like that underdog story. And so that was probably molded in me at a young age, like never being on an all-star team and always being like, hey, I'm going to be better. I'm going to put in the work. Whether that's, again, like just having a process to become better. And to all those kids, if they're listening, like, you don't make that all-star team. You look at Michael Jordan, he didn't make his, the varsity team his freshman year. Like, okay, like, but still keep going, don't let that sway you. Don't be like, oh, I stink, like that mindset that you're going to have is, I'm going to prove people wrong. I'm going to give this everything I can. I'm going to be the best that I can be. That mindset will take you so much farther, even if it's not in sports, if it's in business or anything prior to your playing career.
I think that's huge. And it's such sound advice for, you could be the star of the team, or you may not be the star of the team. You might be somewhere in the middle of follow the process, have that chip. It's be your best every day. I absolutely love that. Right.
Yeah.
And a chip on your shoulder can be an amazing motivator.
Yeah.
When you attach it to doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's such a massive thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about adversity a little bit. And you are on the mound throwing a pitch one game, and something doesn't feel right and feels completely off. Can you share with us what happened that day and what ended up resulting? Because it was such a freak thing that happened that led to this Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, the Tommy John happened. I was pitching well. I think we've shared this story before a long time, but I was pitching lights out. It was 2014. I was on the verge of making the big leagues, realizing my dream. A week before, it was between me and another guy to get called up, and they chose the other guy. At my very next start, we were in Springfield, Missouri, and I actually had a no-hitter going into the fourth inning, and I was just pitching well, and I just threw a pitch, and it oh man, that didn't feel good. Threw a slider in the dirt. I'm like, man, that didn't feel good. Something in my elbow. I threw like 3 or 4 more pitches, and it just wasn't right. But I'm like, I don't know what it is. And then just one pitch later, it felt like a rubber band just snapped in my elbow. And at that time, I knew exactly what it was. Trainer comes out, said, hey, what's going on? I was like, I think I just tore my UCL. Sure enough, completely torn UCL. And the worst time possible in my career. I was literally probably a start or 2 away from getting called up to the big leagues. Yeah. And I don't know. I remember just having such peace about it. And again, that may have been where I was in my baseball career. Again, I was pitching well, but it wasn't because I was comparing myself or I was upset. I wasn't upset. I was happy for that guy, to make it to the big leagues. I knew my time would come. I was just going to follow the process, follow what was going on. And then I tore my UCL, and I to this day, I don't know why. Looking back, I would have been just completely devastated. Looking in the future, will I ever come back? Will I ever get my chance again? I just kind of it'll happen. I know that I can pitch well. I know who I am. I believe in myself. Again, going back to that Joey Votto story, I know I belong in the big leagues. I'm not going to worry about this. I'm going to come back stronger than ever. So,
yes.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing because especially if you happen to have an injury like that, which is pretty extensive, to have that mindset and belief, still that belief it's going to happen. Now you just got to follow a different process, which includes rehab now and surgery and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's such an interesting mindset to keep throughout, right? That belief is still there, that you can achieve it. And it's not like the chip on your shoulder went away. It doesn't sound like. Mm-hmm. It almost just is this is going to happen. So let's rehab and go back at it.
Yep. 100%.
That's so fascinating. So then later on, you come back,
mm-hmm.
You get called up. What was that like?
Yeah. I was rehabbing. So I got taken in the Rule 5 draft. The Rockies didn't protect me. So the Braves scooped me up. And I rehabbed all year basically in Orlando with the Braves and was coming back feeling good. And it was September. So there was some, contractual things involved with the Rule 5 draft. And it was September. I was supposed to be thrown in games. And they were like, they called me in one day and they're like, well, instead of throwing minor league games, what if we just brought you to the big leagues? So they're like, would you like that? And I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Is that a rhetorical question? Do I answer that?
Yeah. They're like, well, they're expecting you in Atlanta tomorrow. And I was like, sick. So I went up there and I threw some live BPs in front of the training staff there, making sure everything was good. And I got the go ahead from the doctors were up there that I'd been seeing too. I got the go ahead and like, yeah, I think he's ready. So my first game back from Tommy John was in Citi Field in New York, in front of 45,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was almost surreal, man. I can't even. I was pitching on the backfields in Orlando too, facing major league hitters. So yeah, it was wild.
That's a significant jump.
Yeah.
And so you're in the majors, things like that. And I want to point this out because your story, it's not like it just rockets from there, right? It's all smooth sailing and
I wish
all good. Oh yeah. It's just easy, right?
Yeah.
Because what is in 2016?
Yep.
You're pitching on the mound against the Cardinals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Share with us what happened during that one game.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had been feeling that. So back up 2015, I made my debut. 16, I got to make the team. Like, I'm healthy now. Like, they're not just going to put me on the 60-day. So I'm like, I'm doing everything I can. Again, like, I'm going to make this team. I belong on this team. I pitch really well. But about like a week or two left to go in spring, my elbow just started hurting really bad. I mean, every time I picked up a baseball, it was killing me. And trainers were like, yeah, it's probably inflammation in there. MRI was great. They did their due diligence as well. Yeah. And so I made the team again. I pitched 2016 opening day in Turner Field, struck out the side. I was pitching in the 7th and 8th inning, just like that. Like I had 4 major league career games and I'm pitching, in these huge games. And that Sunday on whatever, April 9th, whatever it was, we were supposed to go to DC. So showed up in my suitcases going, and I struck out. So I came in the 7th inning, bases loaded. I struck out the guy, 2 outs, got out of the jam, and I go back out and I get 2 quick outs. And this time something's different. Like the pain is worse than I've ever felt. Like I had been feeling pain, but this was next level. So I throw a slider in the dirt. Sliders in the dirt, I guess you shouldn't throw. But
exactly.
That's when it really oh man, that didn't feel good. And the very next pitch, it was cutter away, Randall Grigic. And I just, about halfway through, it felt like it just snapped. Felt like my arm, up here, just snapped. And I just remember walking off and I'm like, I just broke my arm. I broke my arm. And I got past the line, the baseline, and I just collapsed because I knew it was bad. I knew it was another long recovery. And I was like, not now. I'm finally here. I finally made it. I'm pitching in the 7th inning. I'm pitching in these big innings. This is where I belong. And now I'm not this can't happen. And it all just hit me. And I don't remember much pain, honestly. Probably just adrenaline. But that's what was going through my mind was, and I think even the trainer came out. I was like, Bubba was his name. I was like, Bubba, this can't, I just broke my arm. This cannot happen. And I remember not now, not now, not now. And I remember just saying that over and over. Sure enough, I broke my elbow, the funny bone area.
Wow.
Yeah. And so another rehab, another year and a half. They ended up putting a 2-inch screw in there. So it was just devastating at that time for me. But again, I was like, it was a roller coaster. I can't say it was easy, but I'm like, hey, I'm going to make it back. It wasn't as much peace as the Tommy John for some reason. Maybe because I'd already been through it once. Why should I go through it again? But yeah, here I was going through it again. So yeah, it was not how I drew it up.
Right. Well, I think the important thing is what I hear is that, you had a reaction to it, right? And again, there's ups and downs throughout the whole thing, and now you have to rehab again. But the thing that blows me away about you is you kept this mindset of like, I'm going to work back. And maybe it was really harder. It was harder. Sounds like the second time around.
Yeah.
But you still kept that mentality of like, I belong. And I think that to me is the most powerful mindset that you can have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating. So if any athletes out there or coaches who have athletes that are dealing with an injury, right, this is the type of mentality that we can pass along, right, that we can have as an athlete and pass along to these athletes of get them to that state of like, you belong, follow the process, do the work.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a massive thing. Let's talk about dealing with pressure. Because as again, you started as a starter, but as you transition to that relief role, as you were closing games, things like that, as you're coming in, bases loaded, 2 outs, you get out of a jam, things like that. There's a lot of pressure that can come with that, right? Or you hear the announcers saying, oh man, the pressure that Daniel must be feeling right now to get these outs. I mean, what a pressure situation, all those sorts of things, right? How did you manage that pressure, if you will, especially in the middle of a game with the bases loaded, couple outs, no outs, whatever the situation was? How did you manage that when, especially when things were in the moment, but then when things went well and maybe when things didn't? How did you manage that?
Yeah. I think I would say pressure's subjective, like it's pressure is really what you put on it. You play golf a lot. Like, you could put pressure on a 2-foot putt that is meaningless. You could put all the pressure in the world. Or, like I had the pleasure of watching Craig Kimbrell run out there all the time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he ever felt pressure, so I think there's a lot to be said with that. How do you handle it yourself? And just, I can speak to both sides because my career was the roller coaster, and we can, you can attest to this. Like, I had a year in that year that we worked together, like, man, you're calling me like, I was calling you like, man, everything's great. And then you were calling me like a week later, like, hey, what's going on? So I would say, like, in my highest of highs, like that pressure, when I handled it the best, there was just that belief in myself that I could, nobody can give that to you but yourself. Like us working together, you couldn't give that to me. You could tell me you could give me the tools, but that belief in myself comes from me. And so I don't know if there's a roadmap of, hey, this is how you're going to get belief in yourself. You just have to find it yourself. But that pressure, when you believe in yourself and you believe what you're doing, it's non-existent. When it's the other way, when you're like, when you see that pressure and you feel like the weight of the world is on me, when maybe it isn't, maybe it's just like, hey, if I blow this game, we go to tomorrow, life moves on, life keeps going. And I remember, blowing my first save, and against the Orioles, we were up 3. I was pitching well, and things didn't bounce my way. And I remember that night and waking up the next morning, and I've told this story a lot, but like, it felt like this just like cloud, like gut punched, that I had just let the whole city of Atlanta down. And I remember going into the clubhouse the next day, and everyone was happy and cheerful and like, hey, what's up, Wink? Like, I'm like, do they not know what I just did last night? And, like that kind of, like, they didn't see it as that, like that, but I did, because I put that pressure on myself. Like Snit was like, oh, you're never gonna pitch in the closer role for us ever again because you blew it one time. No, I pitched in a week later. I was closing a game. I got my first save. So I would say pressure is what we make it.
Yes.
And if you really want to handle that pressure, believe in yourself.
It's such a key point too that you bring up is, especially as like I'm a coach, right? And when we're working with certain people, with you, with high schools, with all sorts of things, and I think coaches will resonate with this too, is like you give them the tools, you tell them. At the end of the day, though, I cannot make, just like a coach cannot force someone to believe in themselves.
Yeah.
Now, there's things you can do to help with that, like some of the tools and the way you talk to them, things like that. Yet at the same time, like every one of us has that choice to like make that decision of like, I'm going to choose to believe myself at that moment, even though maybe I don't feel like it. Maybe I do, but I'm going to make this moment choice of like, I believe in myself. And it's like almost detaching from a result, right? That if I give up a hit or don't, or does that make me better or worse? Maybe. Either way, I still believe in myself.
Exactly. And I think I was at the end of my career, I leaned too much heavily on other people when I thought, oh, well, if I believe in myself, I'll get the good results. Like that's not what it's about. Like believing in yourself is what the bad things happen. You're cool. If the good things happen, you're good too, because you have that belief in yourself. And I wish I would have done that better. It's easy sitting on this side, like, right. Oh man, like you should just believe in yourself and, you'll be good. But, I wish I would have done that definitely better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk coaches that you've had right on the baseball field, and you've had a lot over your, career. Mm-hmm. Who's one coach that just had a really positive influence on you, and how did that coach really help you in either that moment of that season or like whatever the time frame is?
Yeah, I would say, every coach, I always tell people like everyone has something to say, whether you like it or not. There's might be just that little bit that you can take and mold it into what you want to do. You're not gonna listen to just one person and be them. Like you're gonna take bits and pieces from everything and create yourself. Like what is gonna make you. So I would say like don't discount any coach. Like you may think like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. There may be this one sliver of something that you're like, that really makes sense. So I would say always have your ears on for everyone and everything. Everybody has some wisdom and life experience that they can bring to the table. But I will say the one coach that really stands out to me that probably changed the trajectory of my career was Dave Burba. Burbs, he pitched in the big leagues for, 13, 14 years. I think for the Giants for a while. But I remember him while I was going into high A. Low A was tough for me. It was a long season. I was like a starter for the first time and pitching 30 times that year. I think threw 160 innings, and it was just a grind. And I always thought I had to be like really fine. And I remember in spring training, Burba pulled me aside and he goes, "Your stuff's too good to be nibbling. Like throw it down the middle of the plate and let it work." He's like, "Attack these hitters. Your stuff is good." And he really like helped me build that belief in myself. Again, like that was something he gave me, but really like I could have just not believed him and been like, you know what, wow, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But I was like, you know what, maybe he's right. And I started doing it. And then I just started seeing results. And then that belief just built. And even when I had bad games, I'm like, you know what, I'm still pretty good at this. Like I took the good things that happened in my quote unquote bad games and was like, let's build off of this. And that's what he gave me that and that process of really like believing in myself. So yeah, I owe a lot to him for sure.
I love that. It's such a good thing, right? And again, it's that translation of like build off the positive. It's not that you're ignoring the negative.
Yeah.
But you're focused more on the positive. How do we build upon that? And we'll tweak this or that and off we go, right? But then trust your stuff too. Trust yourself on the mound.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that story. Last couple of questions I have for you. What do you think allows for certain athletes like to make it to the bigs where others don't,
Hmm.
and also stick at that level? Because you stuck for a long time, right? But what do you think makes the difference? Like when you look at like major leaguers versus minor leaguers versus, and not to say one's better than the other, but like,
Hmm.
I just talked with a 19-year NBA vet.
Yeah.
And I was like, 19 years? Like, how in the world did you stick in the NBA for 19 years?
Hmm.
Right? It's something different, something special. So what would you say allows that athlete to get to that level versus ones who don't?
Man, I hate beating a dead horse, but like
Yep.
those guys, man, they just, you can't even call it arrogance, because it's not like some of the best that I've been around. They just have this downright belief in who they are as a baseball player. And listen, luck's involved and God's involved. Like there's a reason that I played for as long as I did. And like one person to like you goes a long way too. So
Yes.
but how do you get that one person to like you? And I think a lot of it is presence. I don't know if you've read Amy Cuddy's book, Presence.
Yes.
How you carry yourself. Why when I stand on a mound and I feel like, man, I feel so good, it's just a belief, are those games more likely to be better than the ones when I'm like, oh man, I hope I don't make a mistake? Those ones always are the ones that are worse. Why is that? And I think the guys that stick longer are the ones that are like, they're true competitors. Like those dudes love to compete. Like they love to win. They hate losing, but they also are like, I know who I am. I know that I'm better than you. I know that I belong here. And it's just that like belief in themselves. And no matter what's happening, that they're detached from the results. They know they're going to be all right no matter what happens. They just are like, I'm going to beat you, and I don't care where this gets me, what's going to happen, but what's going on right now in this present moment, I'm going to win. And those guys that can show up every day and just with that belief, they stay. Yeah, that's the difference to me.
I love that answer. That's so good. That's so good. Well, and I would like to throw this question at the end, because we talk about like following the process, doing the right things. I love all the comments about this, the belief, right? And how you build it in yourself and build upon the positive, right? And tweak the negative and like just continue working, right? And compete. Talk to me a little bit about like pregame routine, things like that. Did you have something that you specifically went through? And if so, like what was that? And then how did that help prepare your mind for what was about to come, right? Because again, relief pitcher towards the end of the career, right? For a lot of it, you don't know when you're getting called, but you might throw a bullpen and then like, sit back down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, sweet, I just warmed up a little bit. But what was that routine like kind of pregame? What did you do? And how do you think it impacted kind of the way you approach the game?
Yeah, that was huge. The pregame routine was huge for me. I would say like as a starter, it was easier. I'm only starting 25, 30 times a year. So, that was like my day. I remember when I was starting, like I cleaned the house. Like I had to do something. I had to be on my feet. I couldn't just lay around and play Xbox all day. So that was my cleaning day. I would clean the house. And so then when it became a reliever, obviously it got much more difficult because, man, you're doing this, it's 162 games. And then you add on, whatever, 12 to 15 spring training games that you're doing it as well. It just becomes a lot, but I still did it every day. I prepared every day like I was going to pitch that night. And so, I would an hour before the game. Obviously, it depended on we're hitting BP, were we on the home or a road? Like, I had a road and a home process, but it was always cold tub, hot tub, maybe some sauna, like it was some form of that. And then it was a shower. And then it was either I was reading the Bible and then reading a book. And then I would read like a book, like a mental skills book. I would read like a page or two from it. And then I would just read just fiction book, just try to get my mind off of the task at hand, because I just needed to separate for just a little. I had prepared. Now I just need to let my mind kind of relax. And then I would I would only do like 15 minutes of that. And then I'd do like a meditation, like a quick, like just something. All right, I'm going out. It's kind of like that visualizing. Visualizing was so huge for me. I think maybe that goes back to believing in yourself. But I would visualize me like throwing fastballs right by people, and like the belief in myself, like that standing tall and kind of chest out, not an arrogant way, but just a confident way. So I think visualizing took me farther than any other tool, honestly. And that really helped me build that belief in myself. Yeah. But I would say, find your process, find it. Everybody's going to be different. Like I said, most people were like, oh, I don't know how you're going to read a fiction book or something to get your mind off of it. But to me, it was like, hey, I'm still like actively doing something, like my mind's still aware, but it's like, it's not baseball. So
yes.
I needed that. So I found out that was something I needed. But yeah, there was always some like stretching and it ebbed and flowed throughout the years, but I always had something that I stuck to.
Yes. No, I think that's so critical too. And, to your point on, you tried different things, it ebbed and flowed. You tried to figure out what worked, replicate what worked, what you feel like works. Fiction book, that's interesting. So you're like, well, let's do that again. And you just constantly kind of tweaking that, right? And then I love the visualization piece, because that's, I think, the most underrated tool that's out there. And there's so many studies. If you think it's woo-woo or fake or something like that, there's so many scientific studies on it, which is mind-blowing. So to integrate that in is so cool as well.
Yeah.
So it's huge. It's follow the process, right? That's part of the process. No different. I'm like on the mound, on the way back to the dugout. There's little things that you try to repeat to replicate the success you've had and remind you of that success to drive the self-belief that you're talking about.
100%.
All right. That's so good.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
I know I will say, add on top of this, like in the bullpen as well, I always had that process as well. Like, hey, I'm warming up. We're going to do this, and then who am I facing? Visualizing that as well. So there was always that before the game as well.
What a powerful concept to visualize you're going up against, which probably 99% of the time. Yeah, they may throw a DH in there or something every once in a while, pinch hitter, I should say.
Happened a lot.
But again, it's like visualizing yourself going out there and achieving the result you want. And then trust the ball, trust your skills.
Yep.
And let the ball fly, or let the puck off, let it rip, or whatever sport you happen to be playing as you're listening to this, right? How do you apply to the sport? And, Daniel, I'll wrap us up now because I want to be aware of your time. But, for those listening today, coaches, athletes, you might not be in the baseball world. You might be in the baseball world. But everything Daniel's talking about, these secrets, these tips, these strategies that he shared with us, I want you to take it and figure out, how do I apply this to my sport? And maybe it's as simple as mixing up your routine a little bit, or adding visualization in, or just telling yourself that you believe in yourself, right? And reminding yourself that you do belong, that you can make it happen, and dare to dream about what is possible for you. But I want you to really challenge you to figure out, how do you implement what Daniel's shared with you today in your sport? Because that's going to make a huge difference for you on and off the field, on and off the ice, whatever playing surface that you happen to be on. So with that, Daniel, thank you so much, my friend, for taking your time with me during your busy day. And I just can't thank you enough.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. Again, like I said, I owe a lot of my career to you. So listen to this man. He knows what he's talking about. He's helped many people out there. So thank you. And thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel.